Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee, which sits alongside the three area-based planning committees of Dorset Council. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Robin Cook, Chairman of the committee. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Council has had to put in place measures to enable the Council's decision-making processes to continue whilst keeping safe members of the public, councillors and council staff in accordance with the government's guidance on social distancing. As the regulations for allowing decisions to be made at committee meetings from remote locations expired on the 7th of May 2021, at the annual meeting of the Council on the 4th of May 2021, it was agreed that all council meetings that are not executive in nature will continue to be held virtually from the 7th of May 2021 until such time that social distancing measures are removed, and that's currently scheduled to be lifted on the 19th of July 2021. This committee, while meeting remotely, will make a minded to resolution with an officer delegated to make the formal decision. The officer will make their decision immediately following the committee vote on each item and will give reasons if their decision differs from that of the minded to resolution. The delegated officer today is Anna Lee. Public participation will take the form of written statements to the committee. Local ward members who are not members of this committee may make a virtual representation. This meeting is being live streamed to the public, and a copy of the recording of the meeting will be available on the website after the meeting. For completeness now, we will hold a roll call of the members of the committee. Please identify yourself as I call out your name. Councillor John Worth, the Vice Chairman.
Good morning, Chairman. Councillor John Worth here. Good morning, members.
Morning, Vice Chairman. Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Good morning, Chairman. Present, David Bolwell.
Councillor Alex Brenton. No. Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Good morning, Chair. I am here.
Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Good morning, Chair. I'm present.
Councillor Mike Dyer.
Morning, Chair. Present.
Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Morning, Chair. Present.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Good morning, Chairman. Present.
And Councillor David Cook. David Took.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
Good morning. I'll just try Councillor Alex Brenton again. Is she on the call? No, right, we'll move on then. The officers attending today are Anna Lee, Service Manager for Development Management and Enforcement, Emma MacDonald, Minerals and Waste Planning Manager, Phil Crowther, Legal Business Partner from Regulatory, Jerry Smith, Lead Project Officer, Minerals and Waste, Trevor Badley, Lead Project Officer, Minerals and Waste, Lindsay Watson, Senior Democratic Services Officer, and Megan Rochester and Judy Saunders are producing the meeting. So if we move on to the agenda proper. Due to officer time constraints, I'm going to bring item 6 on the agenda forward with members' approval. I hope you won't mind, but the presenting officer there does have another appointment to go to, so I've agreed to put that on as the first item once we've got through the preliminaries. So item number 1, apologies. Are there any apologies, please?
Chairman, we've received no apologies for absence.
Okay. Item 2, any declarations of interest? Well, if anything crops up during the meeting, I'm sure members will make it clear if it is the case. Public participation. Have we been notified of any public participation other than what we may be expecting during the meeting? No. Right, so now onto the agenda proper. And what we're going to do, as I said, we'll do item 6, which is the appeal decision update. And Jerry Smith is going to give us a short presentation and an update on that. Which I think members will find useful because it is important, I think, to know what happens when these appeals go through and the results of these appeals. So he's going to give us some background of this. He'll do a short presentation And if members have got any questions or points that they'd like to raise, please would they indicate in the chat box, and I will call them forward according to the priority. So on that basis, over to you, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Yes, Jerry Smith here. Yeah, I'm hoping to do a PowerPoint presentation for you. I have had one or two IT issues this morning, so I'm hoping one of my colleagues here will actually run the PowerPoint and I will speak over it. So if we can get that on screen, please. I'm not seeing it at the moment. Right, here we go. Something's happening. Excellent. Thank you. So we've got the first slide up. So this report deals with and advises you about appeals that have taken place in connection with two different sites in the authorities area. Three of the appeals relate to matters at a site called Guppy's Yard, which is at St Leonard's near Ringwood. Can I have the second slide, please? This is a map showing the location of the site. Thinking about it, can we go full screen with the presentation? And then we can hopefully see the, yeah, if you go to the bottom bar there, along to the little projector, right at the bottom of your screen, that's the one. There we go. So we need to go back to slide 2, though. This is slide 3, I think. Thank you very much. So this is a map showing Ringwood in the top right corner, down the road, the A31. The site is marked by the red circle there. About 6 kilometres southwest of Ringwood and just west of the residential area of St Leonard's. Can we have slide 3, please? This third slide we're about to see is based on a 2017 aerial photograph of the Guppy's Yard area, with part of the site marked with a red line there. The site extends out beyond the red line to encompass lots of field and wooded areas, and it does lie entirely within the southeast Dorset green belt. So I say it comprises largely fields and woodland, apart from a substantial arc of land through the centre of the site, which is more or less encompassed by that red line, but extends a little bit beyond it. I'll come back to the red line in a minute. Within that arc of land, a range of land uses have grown up over many years, notably including 3 areas of land use for open storage, for which a lawful development certificate was in fact granted by the previous authority in 1993. It's worth noting also that so the lawful development certificate relates for open storage relates to three distinct areas within that site, which aren't marked specifically on there. But what it's worth knowing is that outside those areas, all the rest of the site is covered by an enforcement notice which prevents open storage. So that's the distinction really in terms of the lawful use on that land. Now, the first of the appeals we want to tell you about related to the non-determination of an application for another lawful development certificate for the construction of hard standing, on the basis that hard standing was, according to the application, created more than 10 years ago. The application site for that hard standing is basically the red area, the red outlined area there, plus some areas outlined in green. Green's a little bit more difficult to pick up in the presentation, but there is a green line, particularly on the southern part of the site there. All of that area, it was argued, comprised lawful hard standing, on the basis that, as far as we were concerned, waste materials were tipped onto the land over many years since the 1980s. And the issue was to what extent that activity actually comprised the construction of hard standing, which is now lawful, and how much of it was actually simply waste disposal. And this was a dispute between the appellants and your officers in this case. As far as we were concerned, it was clear that some hard standing existed, but other areas, particularly those areas outlined with just the green line, which are vegetated, there was, in our view, no hard standing created, simply historic areas of tipping. So that was the first of the 3 appeals. I'll come back to the outcome on that one when I've told you about the other 2. So the second one, if I could have the 4th slide, please. This is the northern part of that arc of land I described before as being developed. The area outlined in pink was subject to another lawful development certificate application in relation to a metals recycling centre said to be operating within that land, again on the basis that it had been operating for more than 10 years. The application site, yes, outlined in pink. Can I have slide 5, please? Next slide. So this gives you a flavour of what was going on or is going on that land. As I say, a metals recycling area dealing with a range of metal waste. Again, it was fairly clear to us as officers that some of the site had been used for that use for more than 10 years, thereby making it lawful. But the key issue was how much of the site had been used for that use, and indeed what the characteristics of the use were that should be recorded on any certificate granted regarding things like the intensity of the use and the height of the storage, which all need to be recorded on one of these certificates for future reference in terms of monitoring any significant change which might need further planning permission. Can I have the next slide, please? Slide 6. This shows the area of Guppy's Yard subject to the 3rd appeal, and in some ways the most contentious appeal. The appeal was against an enforcement notice that was issued against an inert waste recycling operation, which you can see going on in this aerial photograph. In the centre there, you can see large piles of waste materials and recycled aggregates that were being processed within an area which had been bounded by landscaping bunds, which had been built up to about 6 meters high for the purpose. And whilst remembering this, of course, is a green belt, so quite an intensive and to some extent intrusive activity. So we were notified of this, or alerted to this unauthorized operation first in April 2019. Can I have the next slide, please? The operating company had applied to the Environment Agency for a permit to increase the intensity of use of this site, and that's what drew local people's attention to it, and indeed our attention to it as the planning authority, there being no planning permission for this activity. Following investigation, including the use of a planning contravention notice to obtain information, we advised the operators that it would be very unlikely that planning permission could be given for this activity, particularly given the fact that it's in a greenbelt location and the landscape impacts of it. The operators were advised to cease the operation and clear the site. They failed to do that or to apply for planning permission, and an enforcement notice was issued in December 2019, and this was the subject of the appeal. So at this point we had these 3 ongoing appeals. As I say, the inert waste recycling, the metals recycling area, and the application relating to the hard standing. A public inquiry was held into these 3 matters over a couple of weeks in April, and we received a decision letter in May, 17th of May 21. In terms of the inspector's decisions, inspector issued a lawful development certificate for the hard standing, but only for the limited area which we as officers argued warranted a certificate for hard standing, thereby excluding the areas where we had argued that waste had simply been tipped without proper engineering to form a hard standing. So can we have the next slide, please? So that is the area bounded in the blue line there, marked with H. So that area now has a lawful development certificate for the hard standing. It doesn't allow any further hard standing construction, just acknowledges that that was lawfully created. Next slide, please. And so this moves us on to the second of the inspector's decisions, which related to the metals recycling area. This lawful development certificate again was issued, but again for the limited area that we argue did meet the criteria to be held to be lawful, and indeed the certificate was subject to the terms we'd argued for in terms of characterising the intensity of the use and the nature of the use, what was happening where. And the third and final appeal decision, next slide please, related to the enforcement action against the inert waste recycling. The inspector dismissed the appeal, refused planning permission for this activity, and upheld the enforcement notice unaltered. So that now requires that the use ceases immediately, and that the site, including the screening bunds, which are roughly marked as areas C and D, marked in green on this plan, they are required to be removed together with all the rest of the associated materials and equipment by the 17th of September. So the operators now and their landowners now have until the 17th of September to do that, and we will be monitoring to check that that is done. Go to the next slide, please. So moving on then to the second of the two sites dealt with in the report. This is land at known as former windmill stables, a former horse stable site on the Isle of Portland, relates to another enforcement appeal. Next slide, please. Here we have the central area of Portland, the site marked with again a red circle there. As I say, formerly a riding stables, located a couple of 100 metres north of Western Street in the open countryside, which is designated in the local plan as an important open gap, separating the areas of Eastern to the north and east from Western to the west there, and adjoining Perryfield Stone Quarry, which you can see marked there, which is an ongoing stone quarry and indeed a stone mine, which has planning permission. Next slide, please. So a closer in plan with the site marked in red here. The site notably is fairly close to a couple of listed windmills, historic structures, one of which you can see marked towards the top of the slide there. And as can be seen from the slide, is close to a number of rights of way marked variously pink and green on that site, one of which passes right along the end of the site. We received complaints that the site was being used for waste storage and related activities in April 2020. Next slide, please. This shows some photographs of what was going on the site at around that time and since. We investigated, again using planning contravention notice and site visits, and found that the site was being used to store and to some extent process and recycle waste without planning permission. Whole range of waste, mainly mixed bulky household waste, including electrical equipment, but also construction and demolition waste, which the operator Island Recycling collected from local households and brought back to this site, as I say, without planning permission, and in an area of fairly flat, open fields mainly, in an important open gap, and in the within the setting of various the windmills in particular, and the nearby conservation area. So it was concluded that planning permission was highly unlikely to be granted for that activity, particularly in view of the impact on the landscape and that important open gap, the setting of the conservation area and windmills, and also in fact in terms of the likely sterilisation of the mineral resource, because as I commented before, you have the quarry alongside, and in fact this land also has planning permission for quarrying, so sits on a resource of valuable Portland stone. The operator was advised to cease the activity, but failed to do so. So an enforcement notice was issued in August 2020 following that ongoing failure to comply. The notice requiring cessation and site clearance within a month. Can we have the next slide, please? So the red line's the area covered by the enforcement notice. That again was appealed by the tenant operator. This appeal was heard by written representations rather than public inquiry. We received the decision on 4th of February 21. The decision refused planning permission in line with our arguments, which I've summarised, and again upheld the enforcement notice with the same duration to comply that we had originally set. So that time has actually expired. It expired in March. Part of the site, which was owned by a different landowner, Portland Stone Firms, was cleared, but the bulk of the site, not owned by Portland Stone Firms, has not been cleared, and so we are now considering what further action needs to be taken to secure compliance with that enforcement notice, and we're looking at the legal options available to the council for that. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you, Chairman. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Well, thank you very much, Jerry. I'm glad that we the members have had an opportunity to see just the sort of difficulties we do face, and that enforcement does work. I mean, we hear quite a lot of noise about enforcement generally in relation to the planning service, but I think here's two good cases in point where perseverance has paid off, and a lot of work has gone into this, obviously, to get the required results. So thank you very much for that detail. Now, any questions from members? Sherry, yes, Councillor Jesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Jerry. That was an interesting presentation, and I think for councillors listening, but also for the members of the public listening, it really does demonstrate that enforcement is a lengthy and thorough quasi-judicial process, and shows why sometimes it's not as quick as the public, it doesn't proceed as quickly as the public sometimes think it should. And I think that was demonstrated there very, very helpfully. I do feel I must ask, though, on behalf of the public, because it's the question I always get asked at this point. So you say you are considering what next steps you might take if these enforcement notices are not have regard to. Could you just tell us a little bit about the options that might be open to you? Because I think people listening would be interested to know that. In other words, take us to the end of the story. Thank you.
Yes, certainly, yes. As far as I'm aware, but basically there are three options. I mean, it takes really, we take legal advice on this, and the lawyers are the experts, but the most obvious option that's available to the council is the ability to prosecute for non-compliance with an enforcement notice. So we'd put together a legal case to secure that, and that would go to the courts as a prosecution, which can result in a fine and an instruction from the court to comply. In some cases, a possibility of seeking an injunction, and it really, I'm not an expert on what the criteria would be really to distinguish which would be the best course in terms of prosecution or injunction, but there are certainly distinctions between them, and where they would get an authority to and in what circumstances is best. There is also the legal power for planning authorities in these circumstances to take direct action where an enforcement notice hasn't been taken, and to go on to a site where justified and actually do work, for instance, maybe clearing a site, particularly in waste disposal site, we've got unauthorised deposit of waste, and then at its own expense initially, and then seeking to reclaim the costs by legal action from site owners or operators who have failed to comply with an enforcement notice. A clear issue there, though, of course, is the initial cost to the authority, and then the prospects for recovering those costs. Ultimately, if the costs can't be recovered in the short term, a charge can be put on the land, so that if the land changes hand in the future, there is a requirement for any new owner to take on the liability for repaying those costs. But again, we're looking at a fairly longer term and perhaps less certain means of recovering costs, and so that has to be weighed up carefully against the other possible ways of dealing with the situation. But I think that those are the three primary avenues we need to look into.
Thank you. Well, that is useful. Thank you for that. I mean, it is nice to know what the end product is, and hopefully, maybe members might get some feedback on these in due course as and when progress. It might just be an interesting one to see, because I think most of us here all of us here sit on the other committees, and we're used to seeing what I call conventional planning appeals, etc., but these are slightly different, to say the least. And when I look at the photographs that you put up there, particularly the second one, the Portland, with the piles of rubbish there, it's horrifying, I think, in some cases, and I think the public will be pleased to see that we are taking the right sort of action to sort this out. So on that basis, I don't have any more speakers, but once again, Jerry, thank you very much, and hope you get onto your next engagement satisfactorily. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Fine. Right, back to the running order on the main agenda, if I may. And the next item we go to is in the right order here, item number 4, which is the application WD/D/19/000451 Westford Park Farm extension to Chard Junction Quarry in Thorncombe. The decision has been made to defer the consideration of planning application WD/D19/000451 until the 6th of September 2021. It has come to light that Tatworth and Forton Parish Council may not have been consulted on the application. Although the Parish Council were notified, it appears that the email address used may not have been up to date. As a result, the Parish Council may not have had an opportunity to consider the application and make a representation. It is not considered reasonable to expect the Parish Council to prepare a response before this meeting today, Monday the 12th of July, particularly given the complex nature of the proposed development. As a result, the Parish Council will be given time to consider the application, which is now proposed to be presented to the Strategic Planning Committee on the 6th of September 2021. Thank you, members. Moving on. Item 5. Right, this one, Dorset Council response to consultation on proposed energy recovery facility at Eco Sustainable Solutions Parley. Now, you may recall our last meeting, we had a similar sort of exercise where we looked at the responses going forward to Hampshire County Council in respect of Purple Haze and the mineral extraction there. This is a similar situation, but this is taking place in the BCP area, but right on the borders of our authority, and it's for an energy from waste facility. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask, is it Trevor Badley going to do the presentation?
That's correct, Chairman.
It is. Okay, Trevor. I'm going to ask the officer to do the presentation first of all. And then if members do have any questions, points of order, please feel free to put in the chat box, and then we'll have a further discussion if necessary and firm up, because I understand we've got to get our final application in by tomorrow, the 13th of the 7th. It's got to be ratified and all wrapped up. So hopefully we can get through this one okay this morning. Over to you then, Trevor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. Yes, as the Chairman said, this members are being asked to consider the proposed response from Dorset Council to a consultation from BCP on an application for an energy recovery facility at Eco-Sustainable Solutions at Parley. Yes, I also have a few slides, so if I could have that first slide full screen, please. Thank you. I've put this slide up just to give anyone who's not totally familiar with the area a bit of context. The site in question, the actual application site outlined in red there in the middle. To set the context for this site and the application, to the south, you see Bournemouth Airport, the main runway there. You also see kind of immediately south of the site is the business park and the business uses associated with Bournemouth Airport. The site in red, as I said. Kind of to the west and north of this site, you see those silvery lines is quite a large number of solar panels. It's a solar power site all around the Eco-Parley site. Also, you can see quite a lot of green with various patterns within the green, both to the west and to the east and to the north. These are all ecological designations. The green solid, if you like, is SSSI, sites of special scientific interest, and the hatching and the stippling are various additional designations, both special area of conservation, special protection area, Ramsar sites. So the context of the site is quite a sensitive one. You will see that actually to the southwest of the site and to the east, the site actually touches some of these ecological designations. To also mention, as the chairman said, it is within BCP, but very close to Dorset Council area. That blue line that sort of runs through the image, running up north-south just to the west of the site, that is the boundary between Dorset Council and BCP. So in the vicinity of the site itself, everything to the right of that line is BCP, including the site. Everything to the west is or to the left is Dorset Council, and the housing of Parley just off to the further west there. Just to say also, the access to the site is up Chapel Lane, which is difficult to see, but if you look at the business park, which is part of the airport site, Chapel Lane runs up immediately to the west of that and comes into the site at the far southwestern corner of the site. Other thing to mention is that this area is also green belt, so I haven't shown that because it would have washed over the whole area, but it is within the green belt. The site currently, it's obviously a current waste management site. It currently manages green waste, food waste, wood waste, and soils and inert waste. And there's a currently permitted to handle 266,000 tons per annum of various wastes going through the site. If I could have my second slide, please. Just very quickly, this is an extract from the Bournemouth, Christchurch, Poole and Dorset waste plan, which was adopted at the end of 2019. Again, you will see it's essentially the plan or the area, the map you've just been seeing, but this is the actually an extract from the plan, and the site in question is allocated in the waste plan as having opportunities for intensification of current waste management operations on the site, including the management of non-hazardous waste, but noting that any adverse effects on European designations in the vicinity of the site are not considered acceptable. So it recognises that it is an existing waste management site, has potential for intensification, but has to be very carefully managed to ensure that there are no impacts on the surrounding very important designations. Could I have my third slide up, please? Thank you. So the proposal is for the construction of an energy recovery facility, which is, different words, as the chairman said, is an energy from waste, essentially, described as a low emission thermal process. It is, if you look at this is not what is there now. This is the proposed reconfiguration of the site for, should BCP ultimately decide to give permission, the applicants propose to shuffle things around on that site to some extent. So this is what is proposed, but the actual energy from waste site would be there in the northwestern corner of the site. The green waste facility and operation would be moved over to the far east on the right hand side. You can see what would be the kind of windrows, the piles of decomposing and composting waste. The wood storage and processing area would move down into the southwest and kind of the central part of the site. And there on kind of western central, if you like, is the car parking and the staff area, office, and also they propose to include areas to have visitors and school trips and so on come into the site to see the different processes. The proposal is to manage 60,000 tonnes per annum of non-hazardous waste. This is the second, in case any members are not familiar with the term non-hazardous waste, it is one of these buzzwords that gets used a lot in waste management. It is essentially, as it sounds, waste which has very little or no hazardous content. It can be household waste, it can be commercial waste, but it is essentially, as I said, non-hazardous, or as it says, non-hazardous waste. It's not got anything that is going to cause a problem to manage, if you like. So the proposal is to manage 60,000 tonnes of non-hazardous waste per annum. It would be pre-processed, that is, anything recyclable would be removed and taken elsewhere to be dealt with separately. It is expected that around about 10,000 tonnes of recyclable material would be removed, and the remaining up to 50,000 tonnes of unrecyclable material would be burnt to produce both heat and electricity. Both of these would be used on site. Any extra electricity is fed back into the local transmission grid, fed back into the grid essentially. And the applicant is currently undertaking consultation investigations to see if there's any possibility of using the heat produced perhaps on the airport, or perhaps exporting it even as far as the housing at Parley to assist in heating buildings. In addition to this 60,000 tonnes of non-hazardous waste, there's also a proposal for an additional 15,000 tonnes of green waste and wood waste to be managed on this site per annum. So the overall, it would be an increase to 341,000 tonnes per annum from 266,000 tonnes as is currently permitted. I would add that what the waste plan actually assessed this site or as having capacity to handle even more non-hazardous waste. So what is proposed is not up to the limit of what is suggested in the plan. So Dorset Council have submitted a response to BCP informally, and BCP have been asked not to publish it until this committee has endorsed it or added anything else that it may wish to do. The response as it stands, Dorset Council are satisfied, if you like, that the proposal is acceptable in principle, as the waste plan does allocate the site for an intensification of use for managing non-hazardous waste, There are benefits in that it'll mean that more waste is managed locally. The proximity principle will be met to a greater extent. It will give Dorset Council greater self-sufficiency in waste management. There is the potential to produce heat and electricity to be exported from the site. But so although there are benefits, Dorset Council are not satisfied regarding the detail of some of the assessment that has been carried out. And we are not satisfied, having consulted with our colleagues and the experts, if you like, that all the potential impacts have been fully identified and can be fully and adequately mitigated. The three key areas that we're not completely satisfied with is in terms of ecology. And there is some potential that the emissions from the site could have negative impacts on the European and ecological designations in the vicinity, which as I mentioned earlier, this issue is particularly mentioned in the waste plan. So ecology, aerodrome safeguarding, or the airport, there was a holding objection from Bournemouth Airport while they were seeking further information, or while further information was being carried out and supplied. And also in terms of landscape, as I mentioned, this is Greenbelt, and Dorset Council felt that not enough information had been submitted thus far anyway to demonstrate that the impacts on the Greenbelt had been mitigated to the extent that they were acceptable. So our proposed response, subject to members' consideration, is that the proposal is in principle acceptable, but we officers suggest objecting to the detail of the proposals on the grounds that not enough information has been provided in certain areas to fully demonstrate to BCP as the determining authority that all the impacts have been identified and can be adequately mitigated. And BCP is recommended to seek further information and to be sure that, to make sure that they are satisfied that all the impacts can be mitigated and to reconsult. So that is what members are asked to consider. If I may just add very quickly, Chairman, as a verbal update, Dorset Council understand that BCP have received further information from the applicant in terms of the ecological impacts, and the applicant has been doing, as I said, further work. Information has been informally submitted to BCP, but it hasn't been actually published yet. They have also, the airport have also considered further information, and we understand that they have withdrawn most, if not all, of their objections. But again, nothing formal has been notified to us. So I cannot say definitely at this stage that should further information be formally submitted, BCP may wish to consult again, including consulting ourselves. Members may see another report come back in the future on this site, but to date, I have nothing definite, Chairman, so members are asked to consider and respond to the report in front of them. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Trevor. Yes, thanks for giving us that detail. That's interesting to note that they have looked at this. It's a difficult one because, fun enough, 3 years ago, that would have actually been in the Dorset Council area because it's part of what was what is Christchurch, and of course it would have been right in our lap. Then we would have been making the decision as the actual planning decision. So we haven't got to make the planning decision, obviously, but to look at what we've said, and I think you've covered that very, very well. Right, members, questions. David Took.
Thank you, Chair. We can see that in the report that more information is required. But there's no specific about what information should be required that hasn't been. and what we need to see. Is simply saying we need to know more without any say what it is we need to know more. I'd quite like to understand what it is we don't understand.
Can I respond, Chair?
Yes, any comment, Trevor, you want to come back on that?
I suppose my main comment that I would preface all my responses with is that I'm not the case officer, obviously, so I have not read in detail the full environmental impact assessment. I have tried to skim some of the information. The kind of information that, as I understand it, we would like further information. We would like to see submitted to BCP would be particularly the issue of the emissions, as I said, from the stack, the chimney of this facility, and these emissions falling on the heathland. And one of the threats, as I understand it, was to the soil, that the soil might become overly acidic. As I said, we understand informally that further information has been supplied, that the applicants feel they have demonstrated that the soil has certain qualities, if you like, that would allow it to withstand this threat of acidification. We also understand that Natural England have seen the data and are satisfied with it, but I've not seen any formal response from Natural England that they are satisfied with it. So, as I said, we are waiting to see if anything else comes out more formally. But it was particularly in terms of ecology and the impacts on the heathland. The other one was, as I said, the airport had provided a holding objection, and there were a number of aspects of potential threat to the operation of the airport and aircraft safety. Again, the applicant are saying that they have addressed these issues. The airport are satisfied with them, but I've not seen anything formal. And the issue of Greenbelt, our landscape officer, our Dorset Council has provided, and it is included in the report, a very detailed response on landscape issues. And I have not heard anything further about how that's been received. So I think those are the three main areas that we are looking for more information on. There's other issues such as access, amenities, so dust and noise. These are the, I'd say, almost standard issues that come up with minerals, as members would recall from Purple Haze, and also waste applications. But I understand that our own officers are satisfied with the approach that BCP's officers are taking. It's more the ecology, landscape, and the airport that we haven't seen information that makes us satisfied, if you like, yet that those have been addressed.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, well, yeah, I think, Trevor, if I may, just before I bring the other members in, I think the point is we know what we know now formally, and their response has to go in. I think, you know, we can have conjecture on what, as you say, you've heard, but I don't think that should in any way affect what they're going to say, and particularly if that's got to go in within 24 hours anyway. And you did say, did I pick up earlier, you would expect then hopefully a reconsultation? Is that correct?
That is correct, Chairman. Yes, I don't want to distract members, if you like, by saying that there's further information floating around. Our recommendation, subject to members' agreement, is that we respond on what we have before us. We respond as officers are suggesting. We would like to think that should further information be made available to BCP, that we would get reconsulted, but that is up to them. But yes, you are correct.
Chairman, it's Lindsay. We just seem to be having an issue with your sound at the moment.
Try again.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Right, Kelvin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Talking of the impact of emissions, and on a more general point, Am I right in thinking that all ERFs had to meet the criteria of the European Waste Incineration Directive? And if that is correct, is it still the case now we've left Europe?
That's a good one. Over to you, Trevor.
That is a good one, and I'm afraid I don't have a definitive answer to that. I can take that question away and come back, Chairman, if you would like so. But my understanding is that now this is, if you like, speaking off the top of my head, when we left the EU, if you like, the existing legislation was to be transmitted into British law, and until that is done and until any potential changes are made, then the existing guidance and requirements as they are still stand, but I'm not giving you that information from any degree of certainty. I don't know whether my colleague Emma MacDonald might have anything to add to that, but I would I say that would be my expectation, but I couldn't say that definitely.
Emma, do you want to come in there?
Is that okay? Just very, very briefly, really. I think I agree with what Trevor said. I think the only other thing to add is that a facility like this would also be regulated by the Environment Agency. In order to run a facility like this, the operator would need not only planning permission, but also a waste management licence from the Environment Agency. So all the emissions, that kind of thing, would be heavily regulated by the Environment Agency.
Okay, good. Does that answer your question, Kelvin? Thank you.
Yes, as far as you're able. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. But it's a good question. Thank you for that one. Yeah, because it's something that doesn't always come to mind, and that's a good one to come up. Thanks. Councillor Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a comment. I don't want to speak out of turn.
That's all right. You go ahead.
Well, all I was going to say is, given the proximity of this site to international, national designations and local areas of conservation, I think this Dorset Council was absolutely right to be looking for more detail for certain key areas that they're not happy with. And so I have no hesitation in recommending a minded to a support of the Dorset Council's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll take that as a proposal. I'll leave that on the table at the moment before I go and see if there is there a seconder for that?
Happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Jesperson. Okay, fine. So we've got a proposal, I've got a seconder, but I have got two other speakers on here, so I'm just going to let them, if members will bear with me. The next one on my list is Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make a comment about the report, which was a bit surprised that it wasn't covered in really any detail. That was in terms of the emissions from this site, should it go forward. I'm concerned that the fallout of it, of the particulate. So I just wonder what areas of what the populated areas and how many residents would be affected by that fallout from the emissions from the incineration, and what parts per million. And I've seen these types of graphs before, where they give they cover the area and it radiates out, and the parts per million reduce. I mean, we're talking about the acidic effect that could be on lowland Dorset heathland, which obviously is such a precious resource in terms of our ecology. But there doesn't seem to be anything within that report concerned about the effect on the health of the local population. So just wondered whether, you know, we could have why that isn't in the report, why that hasn't come forward to us. I know it's in the detail. We're not the planning authority for this one, but obviously it's our residents that we're dealing with.
Any comment from you, Trevor?
I have again no definitive comment, I'm afraid, Chairman. The detail is probably in the EIA, which as I said, I haven't reviewed I haven't reviewed basically the whole thing. I could look it up and try and find the kind of map that Councillor Bartlett is looking for, if that would be helpful. But I suppose the one comment I would make is that our environmental health officers are satisfied, as I said, that that the approach being taken by BCP is acceptable, and I would like to think that if they had concerns about this matter, that they would have flagged up an objection as well. But I take your point that the there's much has been made of the fallout on the heathland, but there's been less or nothing about fallout on people. I mean, the emissions from the plant will, as Emma said, be very carefully monitored, and the plant will produce two types of ash. So the bottom ash that'll be taken away, there'll be ash coming out of the, or ash that will be coming out of the chimney that is cleaned and removed, but that doesn't remove necessarily all the chemicals. So I can only offer that I will try and find out more and see what I can come back with.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that would be helpful actually, because I know the landscape report, the officer's report, is extremely good, and it does obviously focus on the possible impacts on the heathland area and the other areas around. But in terms of the population, of course, we're looking ahead at population growth in that area, with possibilities. If you look at the draft Dorset local plan, there are issues like that. So the population is possibly going to grow within that area going forward. So it is quite a serious point. So any information we can get maybe on that, particularly if this is, as you say, quite possibly going to come back anyway for us to look at again. So that would be something maybe we need to have information to hand. So Shane, that's a very good point. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Right, next one is Councillor Worth.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Councillors Ridout and Jesperson have beaten me to it, so I was going to propose. So I'm quite happy for it to go forward to a minded to decision.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that. Right, well, I've got a proposer was Councillor Ridout and a seconder, Councillor Jesperson. Does the seconder want to make any comment in addition to seconding?
No, Mr. Chairman, just to say that we, as we know, we have to make a comment and make a decision on the application as it is before us, not taking account of information that may or may not be coming later, and there's a degree of urgency. So I think we should go ahead and support our officer recommendation here and enable this to go forward.
Fine. Okay, thank you. Well, I've got no more speakers. So on that basis, I'll do the roll call, and it would just say you're either minded to support or not, as the case may be. Right, so off we go. Councillor Worth.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Bartlett.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Bolwell.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Brenton's not here. Councillor Clayton.
Minded to support, Chair.
Councillor Dunseith.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Dyer.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Jesperson.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Penfold.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Ridout.
Minded to support, Chairman.
Councillor Took.
Minded to support, Chairman.
I make that unanimous.
Chairman, just to note, it's Lindsay. I think Councillor Brenton is in the meeting, just to double check with her.
Okay. Yeah, are you there, Alex?
Yes, I've just posted something in.
Okay.
I was late in due to IT problems, so I didn't hear the whole of the morning, but I do support this issue about the eco.
Can you just confirm that you did hear the full presentation?
I
please?
heard the full presentation of agenda item 5, yes.
Okay. And your decision is?
I would support the motion.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that. Okay, so I make that on that basis unanimous. Minded to decision. Is that correct, Clerk? Lindsay? Do you agree?
Chairman, yes, that's fine.
Okay.
So I think if you want to go to Anna Lee,
I'm going to go over to Anna now. Yep, I am. Anna, so for your decision, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I confirm that this will be taken forward as per the minded to resolution of the committee, and the response will be submitted to BCP Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, members. An interesting one. This will be to see how it develops. Yeah, good. Thank you. Okay, item 7, urgent items. There are none. And item 8, exempt business. I'm not aware of any exempt business either. So on that note, I'll just say, first of all, thank you very much, members, for your attendance and your input today. And thank you very much to the officers, because I know there were several IT glitches before we started. And thank you. You sorted it out between yourselves and everything looked fine from where I'm sitting. So thank you very much for that. And on that basis, I declare the meeting closed at 11 o'clock precisely. Thank you.